Sophie, Emily, and Ben had been college friends for years. They had met during their freshman year and had bonded over shared interests and their mutual love of adventure. As winter break approached, they decided to take a trip to Sophie's family cabin in the woods. The cabin was nestled deep in the forest, surrounded by towering trees and snow-capped peaks. It was a secluded retreat, far away from the stresses of college life, and they relished the idea of a peaceful respite in the winter wonderland. As they approached the cabin, they marveled at its rustic charm. The wooden structure had been built by Sophie's great-grandfather, and it had been passed down through the family for generations. The interior was cozy and welcoming, with a roaring fireplace, plush furniture, and warm blankets to ward off the chill of the winter air. They spent the first few days exploring the woods, building snowmen, and enjoying the crisp mountain air. But as the days wore on, they began to notice strange occurrences in the cabin. Objects moved on their own, doors creaked open and shut, and eerie noises echoed through the halls. At first, they tried to brush it off as their imagination, or perhaps the creaks and groans of an old cabin. But as the incidents grew more frequent and more inexplicable, they began to suspect that something was amiss. One night, as they huddled together by the fireplace, seeking refuge from the howling winds outside, Emily noticed a shadow flit across the room. She brushed it off as a trick of the firelight, but as she looked up, she saw a figure lurking in the shadows of the attic. She pointed it out to the others, and they crept up to investigate. As they peered through the dusty window, they saw a woman, dressed in ancient garb, her face contorted with rage. They knew then that they were not alone in the cabin, and that they had stumbled upon something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. The woman in the attic seemed to have an eerie power over the cabin. Doors locked on their own, windows rattled and shook, and a palpable sense of dread hung in the air. They tried to leave the cabin, but found that they were trapped. The doors and windows were locked tight, and a powerful force held them back, preventing their escape. They were prisoners in their own cabin, at the mercy of a dark force that they could not comprehend. They spent their days searching for a way out, trying to find a weakness in the witch's hold on the cabin. One day, as Sophie was exploring the cabin, she noticed a loose brick in the wall. She pushed it aside and found an ancient scroll hidden behind it. It was written in a language she did not understand, but she knew that it was the key to their escape. Sophie and Emily spent hours studying the scroll, trying to decipher its meaning. They recognized some of the symbols from their studies in ancient cultures, and they soon realized that the scroll was written in a language of ancient magic. With the power of the scroll, Sophie recited a powerful incantation that sent a blinding light through the cabin, banishing the witch and her dark magic forever. As they emerged from the cabin, they knew that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. They spent the rest of their winter break recovering from the ordeal, and they made a solemn promise to each other to never forget the terrifying experience they had endured. The cabin in the woods became known as a place of dark magic and unspeakable horrors, and they never returned there again. Years later, as they gathered for a reunion, they reminisced about their adventure in the cabin. They had all gone their separate ways, pursuing careers and families, but the memory of the cabin in the woods still haunted them. They had never been able to fully explain what had happened there, and it remained an enigma, a dark spot on their otherwise ordinary lives. But as they talked and laughed, they suddenly noticed something strange. The room grew colder, and a strange energy filled the air. And then they saw her. The witch, who they had thought they had banished forever, stood before them, her face twisted in rage. They tried to flee, but found that they were rooted to the spot. The witch had returned, and this time she was even more powerful than before. They knew that they were no match for her, and they feared for their lives. But then Sophie remembered the scroll. She had kept it all these years, a reminder of their harrowing experience. With trembling hands, she reached into her bag and pulled it out. Emily and Ben watched in awe as Sophie recited the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. As she finished, a blinding light filled the room, banishing the witch once and for all. They stood there, gasping for breath, as they realized that they had been given a second chance. They had defeated the witch, and had proven that they were stronger than the dark forces that threatened to engulf them. From that day on, they lived their lives with a newfound appreciation for the power of friendship and for the strength that comes from facing one's fears head-on. They never forgot the lessons they had learned in the cabin, and they carried those lessons with them for the rest of their lives. As they parted ways once more, they knew that they would always be connected by the experience they had shared. They were survivors, warriors, and friends, united by the bond of a harrowing adventure that had tested their mettle and proven their worth. Just as they were about to leave, Ben noticed an old leather book laying in a pile of dust atop a bookshelf. He opened it and read that years ago, the cabin in the woods had been used by a cabal of black magicians who used it for their dark rituals. They had sought to summon an ancient force that they believed would grant them immortality and power beyond measure. They had performed blood sacrifices and had conducted incantations that shook the very foundations of the earth. But their efforts had been in vain. They had failed to summon the force they sought, and in their frustration, they had turned on one another. The cabal had dissolved, and the members had scattered, each going their own way and hoping to forget the horrors they had witnessed. But there was one member who could not forget. She was a witch, powerful and cunning, and she had been more committed than any of the others to the cabal's dark cause. When the others had abandoned the cabin and the rituals, she had remained, determined to continue the work they had started. And so, she had stayed in the cabin, conducting her own rituals, performing her own sacrifices. She had grown more and more powerful and more twisted until she was no longer the woman she had once been. She had become something else entirely, something dark and malevolent, a force of evil that threatened all who crossed her path. The witch had remained in the cabin for many years, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. And when Emily, Ben, and Sophie had stumbled upon the cabin during their winter break, they had unknowingly awakened her from her slumber. She had seen them as a threat and had sought to destroy them before they could destroy her. But in the end, it was her own arrogance that had led to her downfall. She had underestimated the power of friendship and had failed to account for the fact that the three friends were bound together by a bond that was stronger than any magic. And so, when they had returned to the cabin years later, she had been powerless to stop them. As they drove away from the cabin, they knew that they had put an end to the witch's reign of terror. They knew that the cabin would forever be a place of darkness, but they also knew that they had triumphed over that darkness and that they had emerged stronger and more resilient because of it. And so they drove away, united in their victory and in the knowledge that they had faced their greatest fear and emerged victorious.